the movie is such a gift to women's wrestling fans and wrestling fans in general. A lot of wrestlers from all across the industry, from WWE to AEW and Indies, showed up here. The movie covers so many topics that are essential to what makes women's wrestling women's wrestling. Welcome everyone to Ring the Bell, this is DS and this is your movie review of Queen of the Ring, a biopic of the life of Mildred Burke, the first ever NWA Women's Champion and the first millionaire female athlete in history. So I just got back from the Chicago premiere and it's not every day I get to review mainstream pop culture piece here on Ring the Bell. I think I actually believe that this is like the third time since the Fighting with the Family, the movie about WWE Paige, and Netflix Glow, so I was really excited to watch this movie. So I've heard about this project for like a few years now. Jim Ross is the executive producer and he talked about making this movie for a while. Then we started seeing this like photos trickle in of several wrestlers from like Toni Storm, Kamille, Britt Baker, Naomi, and more being on the set. So I'm definitely going to talk about all those cameos. So I'm first going to talk about a spoiler-free territory, and later in this episode I'm going to do more like in-depth spoiler reviews. So just be aware for the people who didn't watch the film, you're watching this right now. So to pull back, what is this movie about? So this movie is again based on Mildred Burke's life, and it's an adaptation of the book The Queen of the Ring, Sex, Muscle, Diamonds, and the Making of the American Legend, and actually Burke's own unreleased manuscripts. It's a period piece, as you can probably suspect. The story takes place in 1930s to 50s, and it's actually really well realized, and it follows quite a long period of Burke's career from her getting into the wrestling business, and you can already imagine the hardships and sexism she faced when she started. And what's really cool in the beginning part of the movie is that it gets really into the carny life aspect of wrestling, and like the carny life, you often hear about this with wrestling, but Mildred, I guess, started out her career wrestling men at carnivals. Well, like she wrestled the crowd that paid to wrestle her, and I was like, how does that actually work? Like just like wrestling random people? I don't know. And from there, the story really takes you through her growth as a wrestler, and it's not just her individual career growth that's fascinating, because we get to see her go from wrestling in these carnivals to local wrestling shows to wrestling stars from other territories. So Toni Storm, AEW Women's World Champion, actually shows up as these top female star from California. And from there, it turns into like clashing up different promotions and the alliance situation with the NWA. So with her growth as a wrestler, you also get to experience the different levels and hierarchies of pro wrestling scene in the 50s, which is such an interesting part for the wrestling fans watching this. And they go deep into the politics behind the wrestling promotions and alliances, the promoters. Super juicy, especially the part the shoot fights gets introduced. So good. So anyone who's interested in the business of pro wrestling or history of pro wrestling will really love this movie. But also the movie is very welcoming to non-wrestling fans. It's actually quite genius in that, like, as Mildred learns more about wrestling, we also as the audience learns more and more about the business, all the way from like even what babyface and heel is to again like shoot matches and some really dark secrets behind the industry. And the other thing I did not know about going into this movie is that women's wrestling was not legal, or it was like banned in many parts of America, like most notably as shown in the movie, like New York, California, Illinois, Ohio. So that clashing with Mildred Burke and many women in 50s becoming such huge draw, bringing in ticket sales, is very much like a big part of this film. And as a women's wrestling fan that's so used to WWE's Women's Revolution propaganda, and yes, it is propaganda, because before the Four Horsewomen, as I'm wearing this Four Horsewomen merch, there were extremely talented women of Divas era that WWE themselves have restricted, and TNA knockouts and independent wrestlings like Shimmer, they were there slaying it. And this movie takes you to the 50s when the women were bringing big business to the industry, but given the time period, you can see how that clashes with, you know, sexism, legal issues, and societal perceptions, as well as pro wrestling business primarily being run by and booked by men. And kind of like how Netflix Glow was, the sisterhood among the female wrestlers and some of those rivalries become the heart of the story. Oh, and also what stood out was we got this really nice storyline with black female wrestlers breaking into the scene, which I think was a really good addition too. Other thing I really loved about this movie is that this very much has a structure of a good wrestling storyline. So you know, wrestling storyline always has some like juicy personal drama between the people, the feuds, and like multiple different matches that climaxes into this like big pay-per-view like blow-up match. This movie has the same format basically. On top of all these juicy drama regarding the business of pro wrestling, the movie also goes heavy into Mildred Burke's personal life. And I don't think this is a spoiler because you learn this, like, I don't know, first 5 minutes of the movie. Mildred is a single mom, so you can already imagine, like, being a mom as a wrestler, I think just recently got normalized. Even just like 10 years ago, we saw so many women never come back from being a mom, so you can already imagine how it played out back in 50s. But the personal drama of Mildred breaking into this boys club of pro wrestling industry goes into some wild territory. Like, I don't know how much this is based on real life. The director actually said in the Q&A session that he held back a lot of the messy like situations to make this more family friendly, so I am definitely shook. Yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this in the spoiler territory, but you will get in some Dawn Marie Tori Wilson territory of some crazy roller coaster ride with their personal life. The moment I thought it peaked, it had like 5 more crazy twists afterwards. I was like, just like, oh my god, I did not expect this. So talking about action, I mean, the wrestling style in 50s is not like what we see today, so I guess like the movie was realistic in that sense. Honestly, I can't say I'm an expert of wrestling style from 50s, but if you're expecting some like WrestleMania AEW level of athleticism or gymnastics, you won't be getting that. But they actually did a really good job making each move really impactful. I was like gasping multiple times throughout the movie. We also get a lot of wrestling matches throughout the whole movie, but I guess maybe like about 3 of them are more fleshed out. And the action is rather simple, but the final match, I have to say, is so good. So they have this huge blow-up match at the end. They do a really good job building towards this big match throughout the movie. It was just like really well filmed and edited all together. I could feel my heart beating along with the super pumped up song that was playing behind the match. It was so good. So casting and wrestler cameo. So wrestling cameo is probably what the wrestling fans are mostly curious about. I will get more into details in the spoiler territory because there are some spoilers with that. But what I can say right now is that a lot of wrestlers from all across the industry, from WWE to AEW and Indie, showed up here. It almost had like a treasure hunt or like Where's Waldo vibes to finding these cameos, but also don't worry because few of them got really big roles too, so it was really cool. As far as the casting goes, I think Emily Bett Rickards as Mildred Burke was the greatest thing about this movie. I can proudly say that. No, I really think she made this movie because this movie works because of her. Yeah, her performance was so consistently strong that it holds the movie together. And honestly, I didn't know too much about her. I saw her like a few times in some of the like Arrows, the superhero show. But yeah, I was mostly unfamiliar with her, but this was such a great performance and she looked the part too. She worked out. She worked out for this role. Her physique was on point and she said she trained with Al Snow and OVW too. So she really put her work in. Yeah, she looked the part. She was beautiful, but also she did a great job portraying both the warmth and strength of Mildred. It's like a two-sided woman that a lot of people think it's like opposite characteristic, but Emily does such a good job bringing warmth to everything she does while being such a strong kick-ass woman. So I can just like go on about this performance because like this movie covers so much different topics, so many different topics and story points that could be overwhelming and at times all over the place, but Emily really pulls focus on all of them. And outside of Emily, like pretty good cast overall. I guess the biggest name I recognize, maybe because I'm gay, is Tyler Posey from Teen Wolf. He's interesting because he's like this main love interest son, but also is a heartthrob himself. So I'll talk a little bit more about him in the spoiler section. But yeah, it gets interesting. And Kamille, AEW's Kamille, is one of the main characters and Mildred's arch nemesis, and I think she did good. She is the only wrestler that is one of the main casts, and she looked great, like super menacing as always. You'll definitely be hating her because she's such a good villain, as she is in wrestling. Alright, so let's finally get into some spoiler territory, shall we? So if you haven't watched the movie yet and don't want to be spoiled, because even though it is based on a real life story, I guess. Yeah, I didn't know so much going into this movie, so this is your time to bounce and come back after you watch the movie, because there are some gaggy stuff that you do not want to be spoiled with. Let's just start with the list of wrestlers, because I think that's what people are curious about. And I want to highlight these are the wrestlers that I saw in the movie because I feel like some of them were like blink and miss, so please don't come for me if I miss some of them. So I'll just talk about their performance from the most screen time to the least. Kamille, like I said, she was one of the main cast members. She's in the movie as June Byers, Mildred's arch nemesis, and her ex-husband's daughter-in-law, as well as the wife of her ex-lover. What did I say? It gets really messy. And it's really cool because she shows up in the earlier part of the movie during the carnival time, and she intentionally injures Mildred's knee. And when they clash at the final match of the movie, this knee injury comes to play like any good wrestling storylines would be. No, it's so freaking good. And we all know that Kamille is good as that menacing heel, so she aces that as expected. She does get a little bit more depth as a character, especially around the end where she gets close to Mildred's ex-husband, Billy Wolfe, but then she's asked by him to take care of his son, Tyler Posey's character, who's like broken both physically and mentally after Mildred leaves them, and he gets into like car accidents or something. I don't know, Tyler Posey's character was like not. We will talk about that because it gets kind of messy. So that could have been really an area where Kamille could have shown a little more acting chops, but this is her first big role, so she did what she could do. But it is very cool that she gets to be in this movie, as she was one of the longest NWA Women's Champion in the modern era. And I think she filmed this movie as a champion, and Billy Corgan, the owner of NWA, also bought the Burke title for NWA, so that was really cool. So very symbolic. Next one on the list is Toni Storm. She's Clara Mortensen, the Women's World Lightweight Champion. She was that like big name from California. So she's introduced as this like big star from California that Mildred get to work with. So it's like the first time she gets to work with other territory. And the whole backstage politics that goes into the two, which lead to Mildred going into her first shoot match for her to take the title off of Toni Storm, was like one of the best moments of the movie. I think that was honestly the highlight. I mean, Toni here shows up in her timeless Toni look basically, so it's like she nails it. We all know that she will be amazing. She doesn't have many lines and she doesn't really get to show too much personality herself. She's more so portrayed like a very protected starlet from the California territory, but she looks like $1,000,000. Loved her match with Mildred. I think it was really, really juicy. So overall, I think this is like the perfect dream cameo, especially given that she's current AEW Women's World Champion. How cool is that? Next biggest screen time goes to Naomi. She's in the movie as Ethel Johnson, famous for becoming the first African-American women's champion. I love seeing Naomi in this movie, and she shows up in this movie with 2 other black female wrestlers to join Mildred's promotion. So she has few lines, but out of the 3 black female wrestlers, she's not the main one. She's like the second biggest one. Most of her lines are like reactions. And later she disappears from the movie, and we learn that she basically betrayed Mildred and went to a different promotion to join Wolfe's promotion. But still a very cool cameo with a very good role. And after this 3, it was more of a quick appearances. So again, like Find Waldo type situation. So Mickie James and Britt Baker are in this movie. And my friend said Hollywood Haley J was in the movie, but I honestly missed it. By the way, Mickie was billed as Fabulous Moolah, which was so interesting. I heard apparently she was supposed to have some lines, but it got cut. Again, she's in it for like a second. And it's kind of interesting because Mae Young has such a big part in this movie. But speaking of Mae, let's talk about some of my favorite characters. Mae Young by Francesca Eastwood looked amazing. She had such a striking look. And Mae and Moolah being like the 2 biggest names from that era that WWE fans recognize. So it was just really, really cool to see her in action. She brings that famous bad bitch lesbian energy into this movie, which is so cool. She's the queer representation and Mildred's biggest ally throughout the film. So she's like the sister that you can trust. Gladys Gillem character also really stands out to me. I think she's like the biggest character outside of Mildred to have like a flushed out character arc out of all the women's wrestlers. So she and Elvira character first is introduced as having like affairs with Billy Wolfe to, get into business and get booked favorably. And Gladys has this really heartwarming moment with Mildred outside of Billy's hotel room. And like, it's just so beautiful because Mildred never blames the women. It's just such a good touch in the movie. So Gladys chooses not to sleep with him, only for him to find another girl to push and replace her with, which eventually lead to her death in the ring. It was just so tragic. I feel like it almost needed its own movie because it was just really strong storyline in this movie. Really heartbreaking storyline, but I also think it was really needed for the reality of this time, in that Mildred's storyline almost gets kind of a happy ending rewrite. So I think this was really good addition. Josh Lucas as Billy Wolfe, I think did a great job showing both sides of this figure, who is credited as the person who helped make women's wrestling profitable and move beyond just a specialty act or a sideshow act, but also done terrible things to both Mildred and women he worked with. But the only thing is, like, I did wish Mildred got to beat the shit out of him at the end or something like that. At least like low blow or like drop kick to him outside, something at the end, because I really needed that. But oh well, it is what it is. Tyler Posey. Again, he's such a cutie. He's such a heartthrob for a lot of gays and girlies. His character, he was a son of Billy Wolfe, but he's also in love with Mildred the entire time. It's just, this character is just mess central. I think Tyler Posey did what he could do with this mess of a character. So he professes his love to Mildred, but like couldn't fight his father to make this relationship work. Then he gets like injured with a car accident and marries Kamille, who's like Mildred's arch nemesis. It's a mess. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't know how to act if I'm given this character, but this was a messy character. Is this based in real life? Because this is crazy. Like, this makes even like Tori and Dawn Marie storyline looks tame. But yeah, Tyler did what he could do. Still looks cute. So what did I think of the movie overall? I think the movie is such a gift to women's wrestling fans and wrestling fans in general. The movie, like I said, covers so many topics that are essential to what makes women's wrestling. Everything from backstage politics to gender dynamics, motherhood, the sisterhood, and kind of the balancing between sex appeal and athleticism for the women. It covers so many like hefty, in-depth topics into this one movie that I almost feel like overwhelmed how much I got out of this movie. It was really good. The movie has tons of great characters you will love and love to hate. And most importantly, it's a history lesson for all of us fans who are so inundated with like the Four Horsewomen, Women's Revolution, all that stuff. So Mildred, again, is known as the first millionaire female athlete in history. And I feel like it's not even 10 years ago that WWE started paying women in millions, I think. So again, really cool history lesson. I think it's almost like essential watch for a women's wrestling fan. And of course, all the cameos from all over the wrestling world makes it really fun for wrestling fans to watch this. The movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes or so. Not a short one, but also definitely not long. The movie is very much a traditional biopic. It doesn't really break out of that like formula, which is fine. The director even said he wanted it to be more family-friendly story that gives hope. So it's kind of understanding the direction they went with. As much as I loved the movie and I did really enjoy the movie, I thought the movie was like 3 hours long. The movie tries to tackle so many topics when it comes to the business of wrestling and Mildred's personal life and the big cast they have. It almost feels like it's biting more than it could chew. But also at the same time, none of the things that the movie covered seems trivial or unnecessary, so I can't really tell you what I'd edit out if you ask me. There's just so much to cover that the movie sometimes feel like it's just flying through one story to another at points. Like, I edit documentaries, and thank you, Emmy, for recognizing what I do. I could feel the editors were tired at some times. They were just like cross-dissolving to stitch things together at some points, and I was just like, I understand you. This was a lot. I honestly felt like this movie would have been a heck of a Netflix series or so, because like I said, all these topics it was covered in this movie is so essential to what makes women's wrestling what it is. And the cast is so strong across the board. So many great characters. And I almost wanted to learn more about all the women, all the other women in Mildred's roster, all the other promoters. This would have been a heck of a series. So overall, this movie is still a must watch for all women's wrestling fans. It's really entertaining, so please watch it. Please support the movie, and I think you will really like it. I think this is a movie that you can watch like multiple times to get more and more out of every watch. So yeah, let me know what you thought about the movie. What stood out to you while watching this, and what was your favorite part of the movie? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you want to follow me on social media, you can find me at DS on Instagram and Ring the Bell DS on Twitter, and I'll see you next time. Bye!